Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I'm doing a softer opening here for this episode because we're doing a Vincent Price film, and I can't really emulate his wonderful voice, but I'm at least trying to change up the timbre of my voice just to at least thematically work with what he would maybe do. We talk about horror movies on this show. I'm Peter, that is Tim, and sometimes we do older films, and this is actually an older film usually. In fact, this is a special episode because this is the winner of our Patreon vote from last month. The patrons vote throughout the month for a film that's going to be done next month. This month's vote that's currently up on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV is a bunch of Stephen King movies because it's coming out next month, and we thought we'd put a Stephen King vote up. So that's up. If you're a patron, head over there. If you want to be a patron, head over there and you can do that. But this one, last month's vote. Go on.
Yeah, last month was the Price is Right theme, and this month it's Hail to the King.
That's a shame, actually. This is not your fault because obviously it's a different presenter, the one you grew up with. But the presenter on the UK version of the show that I grew up with just passed away this week. So that's you've had a card.
My condolences.
I mean, I didn't know him personally, but yeah. So yeah, that's Bruce Forsyth. If anyone's curious about the name, he was a big presenter. He did like a lot of stuff here. He did Generation Game, and he did Play Your Cards Right, which was basically, fancy like assistant ladies would put out a card, and then the contestants would have to guess if the next card was lower or higher.
Riveting.
It was surprisingly good. I mean, it sounds unbelievably simple, but it was surprisingly fun, and I think a lot of it was down to him. But
I never really liked game shows. I don't know.
I did growing up.
I'm kind of boring.
I watched them as a kid. For some reason, as a kid, I liked them. I've not really watched any since my teens. But when I was growing up, and you had cable, and you had that one channel that would repeat them like, ad nauseum. I used to watch a fair amount back then, but that's...
They're always about stuff I don't care about. Like if trivia stuff, I like. That's the closest, but I don't care how much a can of groceries costs or something.
Yeah, you got to like Family Feud though, right?
Yeah,
that one's pretty fun. Everyone can play along with Family Feud because it's all just kind of based on knowledge or everyday kind of things.
Yeah,
that one's fun because everyone can. You and your weird old granny who's like demented, but she can still join in with that.
I don't appreciate the accusation on my elder, but all right.
I thought you were going to be really dark there and just tell me, Pierce, she's dead. How dare you? How dare you? Fine, she was demented when she was alive. What do you want from me? I don't know your family history. It's interesting we're talking about family histories though, because that's very relevant in the movie we're talking about today.
Oh, bringing it back.
I know. Look at that. Look at that. That was professional. That was professional. Right back into the movie. We are going to be talking about the fall of the House of Usher, also known in some places as House of. In fact, I think the US originally called it House of Usher until the more recent re-releases where they just kind of adopted all the one name. But this is a Vincent Price starring film, directed by Roger Corman, based on a story by Edgar Allan Poe. So you get all these big names, all these Roger Corman, of course, known for many a B movie from the era, from a long time.
And I want to say Richard Matheson wrote it or co-wrote it.
I'm going to scroll up and find out. Yeah, you're correct. You're correct, Richard Matheson.
Yeah, so that's pretty much like a who's who, like when you're talking like names of like horror and sci-fi, writers and actors and stuff.
Yeah, from 50s, 60s, maybe a bit 70s, like that kind of era. Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about. That's what won the vote. So we'll start spoiler free for a little bit, and then we'll give you a warning before we go into the deep spoiler cave.
Spoiler crypt. That's what we used to call it.
Yeah, spoiler crypt. Yeah, I think honestly the word crypt just escaped my head for a second, and I panicked and said cave.
Fair enough.
So yeah, what is the fall of the House of Usher about? Well, it is about a man named Philip who comes riding into this, big, fancy, rich house in New England, and it's, it's kind of smoggy, the land surrounding it's not very pretty, but he comes in, and he's there to marry someone he met, presumably they were both working in Boston, named Madeline. Madeline Usher, of course, of the Usher family.
Mm-hmm.
This is the House of Usher, after all, as the title is made it abundantly clear. And but he's met with resistance. The butler doesn't really want to let him in, and then Madeline's brother, played by Vincent Price, Roderick Usher, he's like, no, you should leave. You can't marry my sister. Don't be ridiculous. Go away. And as much as it could come off as, oh, he's being the protective brother, doesn't want, this good for nothing idiot, marrying his sister. It doesn't really play that way. It plays like there's something else going on, like there's some reason why she shouldn't marry. Like right away, there's something else to it, and it progresses from there. And a lot of the movie is kind of him as Philip trying to convince Vincent Price and even Madeline herself, who's like reluctant to leave, like convincing them that no, it's okay for her to leave and be married and have a life and what's all that. But for some reason, Vincent Price is convinced that him and her sister are dying and they should never leave the house. Why? We'll find out when we talk about spoilers. But that's basically what the movie is. Tim, have you seen this before? Is this your first time?
Not only is this my first time, this is actually my first Vincent Price movie.
Oh, that's really weird, because this is the only one I can think of where he doesn't have a mustache. Like, I'm serious. This one freaks me out because he doesn't have a mustache. It really weirds me out.
I think in general, he really wasn't what I was expecting, because I'd never seen his movies before, but he is such an icon that I was familiar with what he looked like and sounds like, and I've seen him in clips and everything, here and there. So I was actually surprised, like, oh, he like looks like a young, like shaved man, like kind of blonde.
Well, that's the funny thing. It's like even just before, I think House on Haunted Hill was before this, but he had the mustache, and that mustache makes such a difference. I think he also has his hair bleached in this as well. He's got this really bright hair. Yeah. But it really
doing kind of a Spike kind of thing from Buffy.
Sure, yeah. But he's got such a different look in this film. It's really, I mean, obviously the voice is the same. You hear the voice and you know it's Vincent Price, but until that, you're not really sure. You're like, who are you? You're an imposter. What? But yeah, so I guess I'll ask you the question now that I know you've not seen it before. Tim, did you enjoy the fall of the House of Usher?
I did, actually. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And yeah, I don't want to say surprised, but I will say these older, quote unquote classic kind of movies can kind of go either way for me. I can either absolutely love them, or I can be like bored to tears by them. And I feel like even some movies that people are like, oh my god, this is great, I can be like, I don't know, it's a little slow and outdated to me. But luckily this is one of the ones I actually really enjoyed. It just has a really cool look to it, a just very nice sense of like foreboding, and it's just like a really classic like era of haunted houses that you don't really like kind of see that much anymore, where it's just a lot quieter and I don't know, like slower. I guess it's not like even though I love stuff like Insidious and Conjuring, like it's so like kind of visceral and in your face, and you don't really see these kind of this big creepy cobwebby kind of mansions anymore, I feel like.
Yeah. I like the film as well. It's not my favourite of the Price Corman team ups. They made quite a few of them together. This was the first of quite a. I mean, I don't know if Vincent Price was in all of them, but Corman made 8 Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. So he did a lot, and Price was in most of them, if not all of them. So, and obviously there's ones that I like more than this. There's ones that I like less than this. This one's pretty solid, especially I think. The final, it's a short movie, it's 80 minutes. The final, like 20, 30 minutes of it, I think, are pretty great. That's when it gets really interesting for me. The stuff before that, I like well enough. It is pretty slow. It's kind of, it's very old school in that, and I know that Corman's big thing is that he likes to shoot movies really fast. And I think his shooting style kind of shows that he likes to shoot movies fast, because he has this very sort of simple style of like all these wide 2 shots and stuff where they could get the whole scene done in a couple of takes and that's it, move on to the next one, and in fact so much to the point where later on in the film, when obviously for his climax he like goes, okay, we're going to get more stylistic here, more inventive, and we're going to do some more close-ups and things, and when it started doing like close-ups where it was like following a trail of blood up to a doorknob, I'm like, oh, this feels out of place almost, because the whole movie till this point has been these wide shots of like just people talking, and It reminds me. It almost feels like any horror story that was written, because obviously it's based on a an older story that was written before a certain date, maybe earlier in the century. All the characters, all the protagonists and stuff, always seem to be rich. It's always these rich people who have these big houses. So everyone's very proper. They're there to be wed someone or something like that. It's always got this proper high society kind of setting to it.
Yeah, I feel like before there was a time where it was more like this kind of thought of like, hey, rich people are great. We should aspire to be like them. They must be really good people if they got so rich.
Well, that was a big thing with Psycho, which was actually the same year, funnily enough. But then obviously more so in the 70s when other things started to come in, where it took the horror away from these rich fancy houses in the middle of nowhere and said, no, let's bring the horror into what people see every day.
Yeah.
Like, that was the whole idea.
Then all these rich people's their monocles just flew off. They're like, what?
How dare they? How dare we had a privilege of being in all these horror films, and now all of a sudden it's all these regular working class people. How dare they? How dare they? What? So there's very much that, and a lot of it is like these people talking, and of course they have a butler named Bristol, who's like seeing to their every need, and they're this rich family, and it's that kind of. And we never actually leave the house really. Like the movies, the entire film set there, and again it feels like they built some sets. They used their sets, and that was the whole movie. Like that was the whole thing. And that's okay. I mean, I think because of the shooting style, it does often feel like a play more than a movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if you felt that way watching it. It's like all these wide shots and these like sets. Then obviously they moved to different sets, so it's not a play couldn't quite achieve it, but it feels like that a lot of the time, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. No. It kind of comes from a time where a lot of the horror is like sort of getting to it through discussion, which these days most people try to avoid. You want to show rather than tell, but here it's more like what's not being said rather than what is being said, and it's kind of because a lot of the movies Vincent Price kind of not refusing to just flat out tell them what's going on, and like why can't she leave, why can't she do this, why
I thought they did a good job of letting the horror come out through like just the sets and the atmosphere, and the music I thought was pretty good, and just the
very classical music, with very all these strings and kind of like Philip's like wandering around at night, and like the house is creaking, and you're hearing these strings go, and
and like you can really feel the the main character Philip, like his frustration as he's like getting closer and closer to I like, why can't I be with this girl? Like, what are you hiding? Why can't we just leave? And it does a good job of like escalating his like anger and I guess almost like insanity. Like
I mean that's the thing. Like the movie like then touches on like why this is the way this is. The family history that's led to this. Because I mean I don't think it's a spoiler to say that right early on, Vincent Price's character Roderick says that the family's got a curse, or the blood's tainted, I think is the exact phrase he uses, and it's like, that's why she can't leave, she can't have kids. In fact, when he's like, I plan to marry your sister, he's like, does this dream include children? It's like, of course it includes children, God willing. It's like, oh, God willing, if you only knew the horrors I knew. And it's like, well, what's going on? Tell him, maybe. But then, of course, if he just tells him, then that's half the movie gone, because a lot of it's like him trying to figure things out, and even the butler's like knows more than he's letting on, and it's like what is going, because you get the impression that it's kind of a haunted house movie, but it's not really. Like some stuff does happen, but it's not really about like the haunted stuff building till there's a big haunting thing going on. It's not really that.
Yeah, it's that kind of like almost like I'm not familiar with a lot of Poe stuff, so I don't know if this is a signature of his, but it almost reminds me of like a Lovecraftian horror where the horror is kind of like this madness in your mind, or
a little bit.
Something that's kind of more unseen, which I believe Poe was a someone that Lovecraft looked up to or admired, so that could explain that. But
Really, that's interesting. I didn't realize. I didn't know in my head when in time each one. I didn't realize one was significantly before the other.
Yeah, I want to say Poe was not like super far off, but I could be wrong. I'm not an expert, but I believe Poe was like earlier 1800s, and Lovecraft. I think he was born in the 1800s, but really like kind of got bigger like in the early 1900s.
That's cool. That's cool.
I could be completely wrong, so don't feel to in the comments or whatever.
No, please do.
Well, actually,
Well, actually, if you just if you actually knew your things, maybe you'd understand the film better. You goat-loving piece of shit.
Oh Jesus.
Oh dear. So, I think we'll go to spoilers. So we can talk about plot, and I think that's where we are now. So full spoilers from this point on for the fall of the House of Usher. So obviously, sister doesn't want to leave, and he keeps hinting at things, and eventually, like, there's a couple of like murder attempts, not death attempts. Yeah, I speak English, kind of good. So there's a couple of like chandelier almost falls on him. He just dives out the way at the last second. At one point, the banister for the stairs like gives way, and he almost falls off. And it's like the house is trying to kill him, kind of thing. And we see this big crack in the side of the house, and it's constantly rumbling. And eventually, and we find out all these interesting things about Roderick and Madeline. Neither of them, like, all their senses are all very acute, so they can't eat anything beyond really boring things because they taste too much. They're very sensitive to light and sound. Like, they make like him wear different shoes when he comes in, so they're softer and he doesn't make as much noise, and all these little things that sort of build this up. And eventually, like, once she starts taking sick, and Roderick claims that both of them are dying, he eventually explains the history of the family. And he's going through the hall, and it's all these paintings of the great grandfather, the great grandmother, great 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 grandfather, grandfather, father, blah blah blah, and it's like one's a slave, or one's a mass murderer, one's like a drug addict, and a like whatever. Like they all had like three things. Like they were all the worst people imaginable, in multiple ways, and it's like because of how awful the family is, it's put this tainted blood in the family that everything dies, and it follows everyone. And we find out that they actually had a pact.
Follows.
Yeah, they had this pact when they were younger that neither of them, they agreed to never have children so that the curse would end with them, and that's why he's adamant that he can't take his sister. Like it has to end. Which is it's almost a little disappointing they didn't explore that a little bit. That she obviously when she was away in Boston, she met him, and they fell in love, and they talked about getting married and all this stuff. She obviously like her feelings overcame her, and she like forgot about all this stuff, or not forgot, but at least decided that love was worth it. It was worth the chance. And maybe it would have been interesting if they explored that a little bit more, like her.
Yeah,
because
I also
I think it was a complaint to make about the movie. And this is part of when it was made, but there's one female character, and she is just constantly needing help. The men are talking about her as if they need to take care of her. She's fainting from like shock repeatedly. Like she's very much just a plot device rather than a character.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But
yeah, it would have been interesting maybe to see her more outside of the house. It almost makes me wonder if there's some connection between the house and the madness, like maybe when she was away in Boston, and away from the influence of the house, if that almost cleared her head and made her more reasonable and more open to these kind of feelings and stuff.
It makes you wonder how much this is kind of self-fulfilling rather than actual it's coming for you kind of thing. Like we find out all this stuff, and then obviously, eventually, we find out later there's like a sort of twist where we think she's dead. She's just died from like shock, and like Philip's blaming Roderick, but then Roderick blames him. It's like him coming and trying to change things that's caused this death. Like her heart couldn't take it, and she's dead. But we find out that she didn't die. She goes into these like these like almost comas. These and she's in these sort of like comatose states.
Like a sleep disorder kind of thing, like she falls into a heavy sleep.
Yeah, because we already established earlier in the film she sleepwalks. Like we find her like elsewhere from her bed, and like it goes through the motions of like putting her in the family crypt downstairs with the rest of the family, and then when Philip realizes, he storms off and he starts like searching the house, and he searches for Roderick, and he starts banging around. I love that when he goes to the casket that she's meant to be in, there's this giant, it's like one of the biggest padlocks I've ever seen in my life, holding it shut, which he breaks off with an axe in like one hit. Like it's really quite quite an easy job of it. I'll say maybe Philip's super strong and he's not letting on, but
yeah, the locks weren't what they, not the heavy, strong locks we have nowadays.
yeah, locks were shit back then. That's it. That's the only explanation. So, but she's not there, and there's another coffin that's been chained up, and we think she's in that. But we see that there's one of the best shots of the movie. Actually, is probably her hand with blood like coming out of the side of the casket. It's good stuff. But basically, eventually, he confronts Roderick, and like he's like going mad, and he's there's a great little thing where when he's like trying to say that she's definitely dead, she's just somewhere else. Like it cuts to this chained up coffin, and it cuts kind of intentionally awkward so that you know that he's like thinking about it in a weird way. So it's just like suddenly entered his head, and it goes from there. But the final of the movie is that she's actually like she's got the madness. She's went mad. Like this whole experience and being put in the coffin alive has made her go crazy. So she's like she's possessed. She's like a demon, like going through the house. Like I like how all this stuff is shot. Like it's all this like close ups of her face, and she's got this makeup on that makes her look just a bit more demented. Her hair's quite big. She's trying to strangle everyone she sees. She goes to kill her brother, and she's like screaming all over the place, like it's a banshee-like scream. And this is where the horror element of the movie really kind of kicks in.
And she does a good job of like there's something off about her. Like she seems legitimately unhinged, as opposed to someone that is trying too hard or like overacting to be super crazy. Like I don't know. There's something kind of like almost otherworldly and off-putting about her.
I think what makes the movie work a lot for me is that there's like quite a shock with how visceral she feels compared, because the rest of the film is this kind of laid-back horror movie where it's just all these people talking about things, and you feel like it's never going to get that extreme. And I mean, arguably it's not that extreme by today's standards, but just compared to the rest of the film, her craziness, her like her eyes and the way it's shot, because the shooting style, like that's when it changes. It's when she's suddenly on the list that the filmmaking gets a lot more interesting, and we have these like following the blood drips up the door handle, and this is when Philip's like trying to follow where she's went, because she's like leaving a trail of blood, and like all of that stuff's like really suspenseful, and it's really cool. That's it. There's another scene, the first scene where I really like the horror elements. Actually, there's a dream sequence with Philip.
Yeah, that whole scene like looks really cool. You're talking about like when he's kind of like searching, and then there's kind of like this bluish fog.
Yeah,
it's like all surrounding him, and
yeah, it's bluish fog, and then he goes into like the altar, and like all the family members we've heard about from the paintings are all there, and they all turn around and they're holding like knives and weapons, and like they're all smiling, and again they're completely crazy, they're like psychotic looking, and Vincent Price is even there, and he's also smiling at him, and it's kind of like, oh, you're being welcomed to the family. This is maybe a bad idea. Like, what are you marrying into here, sunshine? This is maybe a bad move. But that was that was probably the first scene in the movie where I'm like, oh man, this can be quite creepy. Like, because up until now, it's like I'm enjoying it. It's fun, but it's like that was when it got okay. This movie's got a few more tricks up its sleeve that maybe I wasn't quite expecting.
Yeah, and I like that scene. It felt very 60s, but like in a good way. Like it was a little trippy, kind of psychedelic. But it fits for the time and the aesthetic of the movie and everything.
Yeah, it was like all of a sudden it turned into a little bit of Carnival of the Souls or something like that, or Carnival for Souls, which is a movie we'll have to do at some point. Actually, it's a fantastic film. But awesome. So I like how it ends as well, actually, because it's a really depressing ending where Madeline actually does like strangle her brother to death. Bristol the butler gets like beamed, because as she's killing him, the fire and then the storm and the house itself begins to like all of it comes together, and like a fire starts from the fireplace, and like everything's burning, and I kind of like the idea that the house is the reason why it falls is because the last of the family members are alive. It's almost like if there was a living relative still there, the house would have stayed up because there's still someone to torment, but there's not. So Philip gets out because he never married into it, and he's like, we end with him like outside the building, and it's like actually sinking into the marsh, and that's when we get the Edgar Allan Poe quote that the last line of the story comes up, which is a pretty cool little touch. I hate to critique all special effects, right? Because I actually do think, because all of the shots of the house from the outside, I think, are a visual effect. None of them are like, I don't think they actually had the house where it was. Like, it was all of it's kind of got this fake look to it, but it's kind of cool. Like, it's not bad looking. But when it's on fire at the end, the flames are the wrong size, and they look really big, and they actually what it actually does is it makes Philip look smaller than he is compared to the house. Because the flames are so big, it looks like a model house is on fire, and then he's like in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So I can't really blame them. They did the best what they were working with, but it stuck out to me. And I'm like, that looks a bit funny nowadays, but hey ho.
I like a little bit before that when they're in the house and it's starting to catch on fire. Like you could almost feel like the heat of the flames like on the actors, like faces and stuff, because they just like lit a bunch of stuff on fire and like must have just had them like, yeah, okay, go act like right next to this raging inferno.
And we can't do it again, so make sure it's a perfect take.
Yeah,
don't worry, I'm actually scared, Mr. Director. I'll be fine.
And did you ever watch that Roger Corman documentary?
I have not, unfortunately. It's something I should try to get around to.
Yeah, I forget the name of it, but it was really good. But I remember they were talking about like a more recent movie that he was doing. I think it was some type of like either like a shark or a gator movie or something.
Was this you get a rough time frame for this? Was this like 90s, 80s?
I think like 2000s, like maybe like early 2000s possibly.
Because he's been making movies for a long time, so depending on when that documentary was made, and your movie might have been in the 90s, but yeah, go on.
But the actors were talking about how they were doing some like swimming scenes in I think it was, I forget if it was like the ocean or a lake, but they were in another country filming some stuff, and they saw like all these like warning signs, just like these signs with like a shark and then like a line going through them, like and the actors are like, are you sure it's like safe to swim here? And like Roger Corman's like, yeah, it's fine, no, we checked with the locals, it's totally fine. And then of course like later they found out that it wasn't, like the locals were telling them like, you idiots, like don't get in the water here.
That sounds about right. See, the funny thing is if I was directing a movie, I wouldn't do that. Not because, and I'd still be selfish about it, but the reason why I wouldn't do it is because, well, I don't want the actor to die halfway through filming. That's just more problems for me. Like, forget about their safety. I mean, they can die after I finish making the movie. That's fine. Like,
sure.
Whatever. Once you've done all your dubbing and stuff that I need you to do, you're free to check on out. But, nah, I mean, he's notorious for being the low budget, like stick it together with a bit of tape and get it done kind of guy. But to be fair, his movies look pretty decent. Like,
yeah, and
for the most part.
It's actually kind of funny because most of the stuff I know from him is like, he's a super cheesy B movie guy. But watching this, like, no, this is like a legitimate movie. Like, I don't really feel like this is a B film. Like
I can feel the not cheapness, but like I can see how he's been, smart with the money, right, to make it work. And you can sort of feel like I say, it's shot like a play. There's not a lot of fancy ideas going on. And when there is, it's like the one dream sequence, and then like the last like 10 minutes are kind of where all the fancy stuff went, and then the rest of it's pretty straightforward, how it's shot, how they present it. But that's not necessarily bad. Like, it works for the time period. I think if you made a movie like this now and it was shot the exact same way, it would feel a bit weird. Like, you'd probably go, why is it just shot like this the whole time? But that's part of the thing. Is like, funny enough, on the Blu-ray I was watching, there was a little intro from Vincent Price, and it wasn't a new intro. Obviously, he's been dead for a while, but it was like, I want to say the 80s. Like, there was like a channel was like showing like all these movies over like the course of like 2 months or something like that, and he did like an intro for each one. So it's on the Blu-ray and it plays before the movie, and it's you can tell it's from like the 80s. It's like a shitty VHS like copy they've got of it from whoever still had it, and he mentions that the film would be shot in like 10 days, and like that'd be how quick the schedule was and like how quick they were getting it in. But it was just it was fun to hear him talk about all that stuff. But so I think it's a solid movie. It holds up relatively well if you like slow old school movies. I think if you're someone who like can get into old movies like this, I'll just bore you like the rest do. But
if you can appreciate that, at the very least, I think it's worth a watch just to get this like specific type of kind of gothic haunted house atmosphere that we don't really get as much nowadays.
Yeah.
And I would definitely be remiss if I didn't mention that the ending was like such a Castlevania ending. Like every every Castlevania game ends with like the hero looking out on the castle as it like sinks into the ground, and that made me happy to see.
Perhaps there's a bit of influence there, although I'm pretty sure there's probably some actual vampire stories that end that way that they probably
Oh, sure.
took inspiration from. But you know,
But I wouldn't be 100% surprised though if there was, because the original first NES Castlevania games were actually supposed to be a not like a parody, but maybe I guess like a love letter to like old Universal monsters, like to the point where like in the credits they actually list like instead of actual people they list like like I think Bela Lugosi and like stuff like that.
oh, interesting. There's some trivia that I did not know, Tim.
I really like the scene where I mean, really small thing, but again, just a cool visual of him kind of like sticking his hand on the railing, and it's just kind of like sinks into it, and it's all like, I guess, powder or dust or whatever you would say.
Yeah.
And yeah, not really. I mean, we mentioned the kind of trippy dream sequence. I thought that was really cool. Other than that, and it doesn't really feel like there's a ton of like standout scenes. It is pretty short. Um, and yeah, like I'd say maybe the first half or 2/3 is kind of the same thing. Like not a ton is.
I think a lot of it
brought up.
Stays entertaining though, because A, you're building the mystery.
Yeah.
B, Vincent Price is a very good actor. Like he
Definitely.
I mean, I don't know if he would be good in like if you cast him like obviously he's not around, but let's say you cast him in like a I don't know, a big new movie, like whatever, like pick anything, an old movie or something
Fast
like
and
that.
the Furious.
Well, I think he would class that up a bit. But like in terms of being like an animated actor who's like kind of he does like comparing it again to a play, he is kind of like he accents himself a little bit more. He enunciates. He's very animated with his like his composure. He'll stand in a really kind of he'll be very dramatic the way he moves and all those kind of things, and it's very funny to watch. And I think there's types of movies where that would feel out of place, but he obviously made a name for himself being in all these kind of movies that it felt really right. It felt like these not cheesy, but certainly kind of old school horror movies where that kind of played off and it worked well with everything else around him.
I think, like you said, theatrical is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, that's just how he is, and then he's got a really unique voice, of course, as well. So,
and one other thing too, I'd like to recommend. I never read the actual story, but I did read a lot of the like a lot of different post stuff that was like adapted into comic books by Richard Corman.
all right.
So if you and he does such a good job, and I remember this one I thought was particularly well done. But yeah, I'd recommend if people have any.
You'd
interest
already read the adaptation of the story. You minx. You did not let on about that.
I didn't realize it until like as I was watching the movie. Because like I know the name was familiar, like I've heard it before, but I knew I never actually read the book, and then. Yeah, like a little early on, I was
Tim,
like, "Oh, wait a minute."
I think you were remembering an old episode of MTV Cribs, and Usher's house was on it.
Of course.
That's what I think you're remembering.
That was it. Oh yeah, that part where like Usher's like, "Yo, this is the crypt."
You know what? See if they. I don't know if they even named episodes. You know how TV shows have names. Like, I don't know if they named episodes of MTV Cribs, but if they did not name that one, "The Fall of the House of Usher," I would be upset.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely.
Well, with that said, unless you've got a final point to make, Tim?
No, that's about it.
Well, in that case, what would you rate The Fall of the House of Usher?
So even though I did enjoy it and I thought it was well made, I'm not gonna give it like a super high score just because at the end of the day it's good, but it's not that kind of thing that I'm like, oh, like this is something I'll definitely be returning to a lot, and I want to watch again. So I'm gonna give it a solid 7, which it's good. It's very well done. But
I love Tim.
not like
you spend quite a while, and sometimes it feels like you're justifying your score to me. Like you're worried that I'm not going to agree with what you just said, so you make a point of justifying it, and then you get to.
I like.
Then you get to the number, and I'm like, Tim, that's the exact number I was going to give it. Why were you so worried? Like, what's going on?
It's not so much like a worriness. It's more of I want to have an explanation because, it seems weird to be like, yeah, House of Usher is a 7, and so is Leprechaun 3. Like
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. You take that back. Leprechaun 3 is not a 7.
I'm just giving it as an example. Like if you did like a movie like that got the same score, I like to have an explanation as to why. I'm not saying that these are verbatim exactly the same merit of goodness.
Also, I hate that you're planting the seed that people are going to expect Leprechaun reviews at some point from us now.
Oh yeah, look out, next St. Patrick's Day we might have a little mini marathon for our folks.
We're not doing 7 Leprechaun movies for 1 week or 1 day, right? Not happening. Besides, we actually have some. Obviously, we're working through a few franchises just now. We're working through Texas Chainsaw, Chucky, and Saw. That last one I'm not excited about. But
so we'll need a big new one for next year.
Well, I was going to say we actually have a couple of other ones planned to begin in October.
Oh Jesus!
No, but Tim, here's the thing: we don't have a deadline for those ones, so we can space them out a little bit more.
Right.
Whereas these 3, we have a deadline to hit because there's a new movie coming out, so we're like, we're in the crunch. Which is why you'll notice the last episode, Texas Chainsaw Next Generation, was like an extra one that came out on a weird day that we don't usually have an episode, because sometimes in the next couple of months we're going to have to fit in a couple of extras just so we can get through all these sequels. But this, of course, was Fall of the House of Usher, which was our Patreon winner for the month of... What was the last month? July. So, like I say, this month's vote for next month's bonus episode is, of course, all these Stephen King movies. Off the top of my head...
Hail to the King.
Sure. We have Christine...
That's not Jack Kirby.
Christine's in the vote. We have Sleepwalkers in the vote. We have 1408 in the vote, and we have
Silver Bullet.
Silver Bullet, yeah, that was the one Tim said. No, you better put Silver Bullet on there. That's what I want.
See, I personally, I actually really like that movie, and I would love for that to win because I think that would be a fun discussion. But I do.
Oh wait, Tim, I don't like this. You are coercing votes right now.
Well, no, I just want to say
you are coercing the votes. I don't like this. Is shady. This is backdoor shadiness. I'm not happy about this.
If you really want to torture Pete, choose the Sleepwalkers because that is oof.
It's going to torture you as well.
Well, maybe I enjoy it. So.
Oh, Tim, I hate you so much. Hate you and your stupid little goat too.
Oh, leave the goat out of this.
You actually have cats, but I like cats too much to insult your cats. It's not their fault you're an asshole. Alright, I'm done insulting Tim. I guess we're done. We're getting all wrapped up. So yeah, I plugged Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. There's perks and bonuses beyond just voting, but you can check that out over there. You can get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz. You can also, of course, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you think of Fall of the House of Usher and other Vincent Price movies. And of course, we will no doubt end up doing more down the line at some point. So look forward to more. Like I say, there's some I like more than this one. There's some that I like less than this one. So nice wide variety of movies. But that is us for this episode. So thank you once again for watching. Keep watching scary movies and Tim's scary smiling face, and we will see you next time.